We're recording.
Great. Well, hello, good evening to everyone that's coming in live for our webinar tonight. I'm so excited to be presenting part one of the two-part series of training with Gordon Hester, who has put together brand new information and a brand new presentation he's never done before, just for us on everything that he has learned, everything that he's been studying around our industry. So I don't want to take up too much time at all. Just for those of you who aren't too familiar with Gordon still, he's a wealth of knowledge. He's managed Jeff Roberti's business, who is the #1 income earner in Juice Plus, for over 20 years, as well as being a much sought after advisor, business consultant, and expert in human physiology. So we are all basically part of one of the most misunderstood business models in the world, the direct selling industry. And tonight Gordon's going to be discussing the facts about our industry, its importance in the world of business, and why our culture is the future business model for the industry. He's going to be sharing with us data about the industry that's never been shared before to any audience. It is basically the first look at the research he has been doing on the industry as he finishes his book about the direct selling industry. So it's going to be finding out why our industry is not just a proven global business model, but why it is an important part of the global economy and the business opportunity landscape. So a very huge welcome to Gordon Hester. Thank you for being on tonight, and please take it away.
Well, Carla, thank you for the kind introduction, and thanks everybody for tuning in. This is actually an exciting webinar for me. I don't get to do a lot of them, but when I do, it's generally training-based. But in this particular one, I get to do some things that I've never got to share before. But before I start, I just want to take a second and say congratulations to everybody. I hear through the grapevine that Australia just had a record month, and you're literally growing at 2.5 times what you were this pace last year. So it's an amazing time. It speaks to something that's going on literally all over the Juice Plus world, that we're in this amazing momentum wave, and I'll chat a little bit about that during this relative to my talk. But it's a special time, and I guess the one thing I would tell you we've learned and with my time with Jeff is when things are in your favor, this is the time to go to work, because this is where you can set yourself up for the rest of your life. So I hope you take advantage of it. And again, congratulations. So my talk tonight kind of started years ago. I tend to go to an annual conference every year called the Direct Selling Association. Some of you might be familiar with that, some of you might not. They are the leading association in our industry, so they help with all the lobbying and all the rules and regulations around the world. They make sure they do all the fights so that we all have a business model, and every year they have a big annual convention. And it just so happened that this one year, the president at the time, his name was Neil Offman, came out, and he was just very disturbed in his speech and very frustrated and very upset. And he was really upset because he could not figure out, with all the great things that this industry has to offer, the direct selling industry, and network marketing being a big part of it, why is it that so many people have the wrong perception about this industry? And he talked about that, and honestly, it sort of triggered an interest in me. I'm always kind of analyzing data and collecting data and trying to figure out what it means so that I can help people, make better thinking, build better strategies to help their business grow. So I've been collecting this data for now 17 years, and I would venture to say that I'm one of the few people in the world that might have some of this data, because I also get it internally with the Direct Selling Association. So with this in mind, I started the pursuit of writing a book, and the book was on the direct selling industry, and my outcome for the book was helping people really understand what this industry is and what it isn't, to try to correct some of the misconceptions by having some type of a tool to educate the general public. So tonight, I get to share some of that research for the first time, so I thank you for allowing me to do that. So at the start of this, my talk is understanding the direct selling industry and where Juice Plus fits in it. But I want to start with perspective, because a lot of times to really understand where something fits and how it works, you need to have a bigger perspective. What you see depends not only on what you look at, but also where you're looking from. So I believe sometimes to get that perspective, you have to step back in time and you have to understand the world that existed and the world that we're in, so that we can understand where we fit into that world. So that's where I want to start with our talk. If I go back, we all look at business today and we understand business for what we understand it to be. Direct selling is a part of business, all the world of business that we have around us. But in reality, it hasn't always been that way. They have business records. Actually, most of the records go back to about 10,000 years before Christ. And if you look at the business records, it tells a really interesting story, and that is that the world, GDP, which is the total amounts of goods and services the world's producing, never changed. For all these years, for 10,000 years, no matter what was produced in the world, the GDP never went up. And then, of course, we had a little bit of a blip in about, a little after 500 AD, and that was from the agricultural boom. And then you begin to notice at some point everything changed, and you see this looks like almost like a rocket ship going to the moon. And if we kind of hone on this a little bit more, you start to see that happened in about the 1800s, and this is an important part of why we have business today. And when it happened in this time period, the question begins. Let me take it out one more step. If you were to hold on. Okay, even take it one more step, what you begin to see today is there's this massive disparity, that there is a world around us that has immense opportunity and immense wealth and has business that the rest of the world doesn't happen. So if I look at time, here's what I can tell you, that the past, basically the average person was no better off literally 100,000 BC than they were in going into the early 1800s. That what we know as opportunity, what we knew as upward mobility, did not increase. And if I kind of look at money over time, the average person was making $1 to $3 a day, which this isn't really like a very compelling story, but as I said, things began to change, and we look at it today. And here's the sad part for me. We live in an abundance. We live with the opportunity to do whatever we want. We have upward mobility. But today, 2/3 of the world is still making about $2 a day, and they don't have the opportunities that we have. But if we look at the global landscape and we understand that something has changed, the average global income makes about 45 a day. The U.S. is the highest at about 148 times a day. So literally, in the areas where opportunity has created and where they had this shift, we're making somewhere between 15 to 50 times greater the amount of income than literally 2/3 of the world. So it brings me to a really, well, let me point this out. It's not only that it exists in a small amount of the world, but as we see and we hear all the time, the rich get richer, and it comes at the sort of the cost of everybody else. And today, about 1% of the population makes more than half the population of the world, and we know this is going to continue to grow. But here's the big thing. You have to ask yourself, what changed here? What happened in this time period? Because this becomes really important to the foundations of direct selling. So what happened is really simple. We had a birth of a concept, a new mindset, and so often if you understand change starts with mindset. And it basically was the birth of capitalism. And what happened in the 1800s is there was a change with the people that were in power and control, and they began to realize that if you want to create more wealth, you have to let more people win in the game. More people have to participate. So for the first time in literally all mankind, people had the ability to move up. It wasn't that you work for somebody else and they take everything you had. This concept of upward mobility was created. This concept of a middle class that had never been throughout mankind happened, and because of that, we saw an opportunity for anyone to succeed. And we also saw the birth of the foundational formula that drives all business wealth. And that is that business wealth is simply you times others, and others is the leverage component. So if we study business wealth today, and it doesn't matter what business we study, We ultimately know that you matter, your value to the marketplace matters. But unfortunately, for a lot of individuals that work for people, and even a lot of younger and smaller entrepreneurs, you is their business, because ultimately, they're the value, they're the driving force. And the problem with that aspect of the business wealth formula is it's very difficult to create wealth because you cannot leverage time. And what we learned from that change was to have wealth, we have to let other people win. We have to be able to be paid off of their efforts. That's the leverage part. So whether you're looking at like massive company owners that are getting paid off as shareholders and workers, or whether you're looking at direct selling and in particular network marketing, where we are allowed to be paid off of customers and team, we are a great model for this business wealth formula. And as you'll see, it's really made a huge difference in the numbers of what our industry has done. So as I go forward and we look into time and we realize, okay, for the first time in literally in the mankind's history, we have an opportunity. And the question is, where does direct selling fit into all this? And the first thing I will tell you is you've got to understand that direct selling is really two things. And I put it up here relative to the business wealth formula. The original direct selling has its roots way back in time. And the idea behind it was really simple, that it was easier to market a product and service if you had a storyteller. And that was the concept that direct selling was built on. And in the early days of it, this is what happened. You would have somebody sell a product or service, and they would work their warm market or even, knock on doors. It was the old Fuller Brush time in some of the early companies. But not too long into this process, somebody figured out that in order to have a better formula for creating wealth, we need a different business model. And this was the birth of network marketing. And as you can see, network marketing changes the dynamics of the business wealth formula, because not only does it give you the same opportunity to have unlimited customers, but even more important, it allows you to have unlimited team that is having unlimited customers. So there's sort of an exponential power to this whole thing. And this is what makes network marketing so special. And what we've seen over time is that direct selling has basically evolved into network marketing. If you kind of look at the data, just to give you a perspective, keep in mind there's over 10,000 companies in direct selling. You'll see that these days over 95% of those companies are network marketing companies. And to be honest with you, the reason the others aren't is because some countries don't allow network marketing. They only allow direct selling as a business model. And they're the countries that kind of take away the other small percentage. So when I'm talking about direct selling, really what I'm talking about is network marketing, because that's the business wealth formula that allows the companies to have the most success and the field to have the most success. We certainly know that this business model is proven. And this is always an entertaining part of conversations I have with people when people come up and say, oh, you're in one of those, or this is an illegal pyramid. And clearly they're entitled to their opinions, but the data and the facts sort of support a different kind of a perception. So let's start with sales. If I look at sales over time, so it's a 24-year history of sales, you'll start to see some things. One, I pointed out for you that in 24 years, this industry has done about $245 trillion in sales. Currently, it's approaching $200 billion annually, and as you can see, it continues to grow on a regular pace. Matter of fact, let me touch on a trillion first, then I want to show you exactly how much of a pace it's moving at. People don't understand a trillion, so I wanted to give you a couple examples of what this was so you get a perspective of how big that number is. If I take it in terms of time, a million seconds is 12 days, a billion is 31 years, a trillion seconds is all the time going back to 30,000 years before Christ. So this is a big number. If I even give you one more example in terms of what is a trillion in money, think about this. If I spent $1 every second around the clock, it would take me over 312,000 years to spend $1 trillion. And if I spent 1 million an hour nonstop for 24 hours a day, you wouldn't run out of $1 trillion for 411 years. And don't we all wish we had that problem, being able to spend money like that? So I want you to understand that $1 trillion is a massive figure. To give you a perspective with your country, $1 trillion or $2.45 trillion is about 2 times the Australian GDP. So think about all the goods and services that are produced in Australia and take twice that. That comes to about 2.54 million. So what it tells me, this is a massive proven global economic business model. But is it growing? Is this something that's just been there? Is this something that's changing? When we look at it, we begin to realize that not only is it growing, it's growing at a very big pace, that over a 24-year history, the direct selling industry, and particularly network marketing, is growing about a 380% pace. And it continues to grow regardless of the economic cycles, regardless of the political cycles, regardless of the social cycles or business cycles, that for the most part, almost 90% of the time, 20 out of 24 years, direct selling has been in an uptrend. This is important to understand. This goes back to how opportunity works. What you want to be involved with in business is anything that's in a momentum wave. And this industry, as you can see, is not only in terms of a long-term momentum wave, but notice how different it is since 2010. When we came out of the last recession, network marketing and direct sales sort of grew in popularity, and it's growing now. Just to give you a perspective, in the U.S. over this time period, actually a little bit of a shorter time period, we've had over 90 million people get involved in the direct selling industry. So this is a massive global business model. But here's what's really exciting. You never know things without perspective. So I went back and said, well, the global sales is impressive, but is it really that impressive? What happens if I compare it to the global growth of GDP? If I look at the total goods and services of the world, and as you can see, it's pretty amazing that this industry is growing about 4 times faster than what our economy is growing, and that sort of speaks volumes for how big this industry is growing and how popular it's getting and how much of an impact it's having on the global economy. If I go one step farther and get out of sales and look at salespeople, the number of people involved with the industry today, it's about 100 million people that are using direct selling and network marketing to own their own business. It's literally one of the largest business models that exists in the world. But notice how much bigger the growth is. The popularity of this as a business model, it has staggering growth, 881% over this 24-year period. And just like sales, it continues to grow regardless of how many people or what's going on in the economy, what's going on in the business cycles, what's going on in political. Almost 90% of the time, we're in that long-term uptrend again. But this is the most staggering part. This is the part that I didn't expect to find in my research. When I started looking at salespeople and I started comparing it to jobs, and I started looking at the global job market, as you can see, we're talking about 2 completely different trends going on. That, over this 24-year period, when we had 881% growth, the job market actually shrank. We have less jobs now than we did back in 1991. There's been a 4% drop, and I was kind of puzzled by this and surprised by this. And the first question I asked is, well, hasn't there been a lot of population growth during this time? Because you would think with population growth, you would get job growth. And so I went and looked it up, and yeah, 33%, over 2 billion people have been added to the world since that time period that the data started. So it brings the most interesting question and sort of the foundation of why we're doing well. What do people do when they can't get work? And the answer is they create it. And this has become the birth of the entrepreneurial movement, and certainly a big part of what's driving direct selling. Listen, you guys are in the trenches. How many people do you know that are struggling to get jobs, to get well-paying jobs, are in industries where pays are going down, where people are underemployed? You have such a massive amount of people competing for the same space. Years ago, there was a book written on this, well, not years ago, a couple years ago, done by the Gallup organization to give you a perspective on how big of a problem this is. Right now, there are about 3 billion people in the world that are looking for full-time work, and there's 1.2 billion jobs. So you're talking about 60% of the world that can't find work, and we know when you can't find work, you create it. And as I said, this is the birth of the entrepreneurial movement. And what I love about this is foundational. This goes back to a core problem, a supply and demand. There's not enough jobs in the world, and people are going to continue to move in the direction of creating their own business. So I think the direct selling industry is very much in its infancy, and as this problem continues to get worse, you're going to see more and more people come over here to kind of find a home for them to have their own business. So I guess the other thing you have to ask yourself about the industry is, is it really popular? Is it accepted as a global business model? And today, there's about 196 countries in the world, and direct selling is in about 170 of those. And there's something that's really important about this piece of data. If you remember, I started off telling you when we were talking about the perspective and where business fits, that 2/3 of the world today lives on about $2 a day. What's fascinating about the direct selling industry and the direct selling and network marketing business model is we are changing how opportunity works in these countries that have really low incomes. We're producing a business model for the first time where the average person can begin to have a business and have upward mobility. So I would go so far as to say that direct selling is changing the global economy. It's especially for these third world countries and smaller countries. We've began to see this in places like India and China where there were low incomes, and now there's massive middle classes. You take China as an example. China's now the largest direct selling market in the world. It wasn't that long ago that they didn't even exist, and there's this massive upward mobility there. So I think kind of the bottom line conclusion for me is pretty simple to make. What the data speaks is the direct selling business model plays a major role in the global economic picture and also in the entrepreneurial movement. But to even better understand the industry and kind of getting to where we fit into it, let me share some data with you about the profile of the industry. First of all, not all things are equal. There is actually a massive country imbalance. So even though there's 170 countries, I want you to understand that these 24 countries represent almost 93% of the sales, and it sheets. The top 5 is 60%, the top 10 is 75%. So you can kind of get an idea of how this works. And these markets are listed in terms of how much sales they do. So when this data was done, 2014, the U.S. was number 1, China was number 2, Japan 3. As you can see, down at number 19 is Australia. So you guys are part of that market that's really driving the bigger aspect of the direct selling industry. But this is kind of what's exciting to me about the direct selling, about the Juice Plus company. All the markets that we're in, all the markets that I have marked in green, we actually have less than 1% product penetration. So whether we started here, we've been here for 23 years, or this is a newer market, our market that we have a very small presence. 10 of the 24 markets we're in, which means 14 of the markets we're not even in. So when I look at the future possibility of this, I understand that we haven't begun in the markets that we're in, and 2 of the largest areas of the world, South America and the Pacific Rim, we really don't have much of a presence in, and there's a big appetite with the company right now for international expansion, and this is going to make a huge difference in kind of where our business goes and the potential of our business, and certainly the size of our business. Equally, we also understand, in addition to there being sort of a country imbalance, there's a company imbalance, and I think this is really important to understand because it's going to change and help you understand some of the myths that exist about our industry. So if I look at the global sales, I can basically put it into one of 2 buckets. 45% of the sales are one thing, 55% are another. And here's what those 2 buckets are. 45% of all the sales are done by the top 100 companies in this industry, which means the other 10,000 plus are doing 55% of the sales. If I take this one step farther, you begin to understand that these companies that become giants, take time to build. The average one has been in business for 30 years, is actually in 20 markets. And I share this with you because there's a real lesson here, and one that distributors should pay attention to. Our business is a relationship business, and so are all the companies that are successful in it. Any company that has longevity and is in this top 100 list begins to understand that relationships are the foundation, and they take time to build, and it takes years sometimes to invest into success and to have this kind of dominance in the marketplace. And I share that because I believe it's the same with distributors. I think you have to come into this industry with a very realistic expectation that we have to invest our time into this business to develop relationships. And when we do that and build what we call critical mass, lots of relationships, this is when the business wealth formula, the dynamics of getting paid off of others, completely changes. And now this is where you begin to hear the stories of people that have some form of financial freedom and some form of time freedom. It comes with the investment of time and building lots of relationships. And I encourage you, this is a time where you want to invest that time. Maybe it takes 2 years, maybe it takes 5 years, maybe it takes 10 years. I looked at Jeff build for 10 years, and today his last 4 years were his biggest years ever. So it's important to invest. And then I guess the next question is, where does Juice Plus fit into all this? Juice Plus is in the top 1/3 of those 100 companies. So we are one of the giants in the industry, and this is only getting bigger for us. And here are the takeaways that I think are really important. The first is a myth, and a myth that gets populated a lot by these companies that are in the 55% that tend to be the companies that give our industry a black eye, that kind of take the shortcuts and burn and churn through people. And that myth is that new companies present greater opportunity, and you cannot make it to the top if you're not involved early in the game. And the data says the exact opposite to be true. New companies don't create the greatest opportunity, they create the greatest risk, because becoming a giant in this industry is a huge exception. So a better plan, and in my opinion the best strategy for kind of being successful on the distributor side, is to catch one of these giants at the beginning of a momentum wave. And I will tell you, in my 25 years with the Juice Plus company, I believe we're at the beginning of a very special momentum wave. I've seen it before. I saw it when we went into Juice Plus and we started a momentum wave there, and I saw how that played out. But the biggest momentum waves that change everything, the ones that create the greatest growth, are when you have new leadership cycles. And if you look at what's really happened over the last 3 years, we have had a rebirth of our company because of the amount of younger and new leaders that we're creating. The last stat I looked at last month, globally, like 1 out of 2 now applications last month were from people that were under the age of 34. And the countries where we have the biggest growth, we're having really strong Gen Y movement, and they're bringing new skill sets, new talents, and with that, they're also bringing success stories that we didn't even believe were possible. And then ultimately we come down to understanding, listen, to with the classes, you have to cater to the masses. Any great business model will allow you to build huge critical mass and huge relationships, and to do that, it has to be diverse. So I didn't have time to put all this research on here, but I will tell you that when you look at the makeup of the direct selling industry, you'll see all economic levels. We see people that are multi-millionaires that come into this that are really interested in building a different model, sort of having a better business than they have with the business wealth formula. And we see people that literally are struggling to survive coming into this, and we see success at all levels, because in direct selling and in network marketing with the business wealth formula, economics don't determine your success. It's your work and how you work that determines it. We see all races and creeds and religion being a part of this. We see a wide diversity in the education levels, people that literally haven't been through high school and people that have PhD and doctorates. We see a lot of success with genders. This is still a very heavily dominated female market, although that is changing. Forever and a day, 90% of our business was women. Now it's about 80%. So we're seeing a lot of men coming into our industry. And of course, we see a lot of diversity. You know, the biggest income stories are actually older people, but the income stories today with the kids and what they're doing are faster and stronger and more impressive than anything that's ever been done in the past. And to be honest with you, I think the reason for that is our industry's going through a paradigm shift as our world's going through a paradigm shift, and that shift is social media and technology. So I kind of look at our business today and coaching people all over the world. I see these distributors and leaders that are building really fast, and I see other people that aren't building as fast. And social media and technology makes a big difference in that. You know, some of the slower ones are still kind of old school thinking. They're recruiting off of their memory jogger, and of course that's always going to be a part of our business. But the world has changed. The world today is a game of attraction. It's how big of an audience can I build, you know, brands out to the marketplace. And the younger, kids that grew up, if you think about history, they're the first demographic in the world that grew up totally digital. They grew up with phones and they grew up with computers, but they're also the first generation in the history of mankind who has a skill set and a talent that the generation before them didn't have. And this is really important because we have to allow this talent to expand and become part of our culture. We have to support this, and more important, we have to learn from it, because social media and technology is something that can affect every aspect of our business. It can begin to change how we build an audience, how we recruit, how we prospect, how we build online cultures. But even though social media is changing the whole face of direct selling in our industry, I want you to understand that social media is a place to connect and build an audience. But today, still, well over 95% of the business is still happening offline. And I personally don't think this is going to change, and I'll tell you why. Our business has always been a people-to-people business. I can't imagine a scenario where that changes, where people aren't part of it. So it's hard to build quality relationships just online, and most of the successful people are even doing their sales and relationship building offline. So even though we see the shift, it's important to understand that we still have to work the business outside of social media and technology. So the conclusion I came to was direct selling is one of the largest and growing business models in the world today. Matter of fact, I would challenge people to find another business model that has the kind of tenets and attributes to it that direct selling has, and of course it's growing. So here becomes the even more important question. You know, how does Juice Plus fit into this? More important, how do they stand out into this? And first for me, and this is so important in the world today, this company's proven. You know, we're at 1970, what's 46 years. And in 46 years, I've been involved in a lot of times when there was obstacles and challenges. And what I have learned is this management team that continues to grow and continues to get stronger has the ability to succeed in any season, has the ability to succeed in any business cycle. You know, kind of if you take it to the next step, you know, whenever we've had, you know, a springtime season, the company grew. Whenever we had a summer, you know, we were harvesting and doing well. Whenever we went into the fall, we had the ability to make the business grow. But more important, when we were headed into challenging times, recessionary times, times when things were difficult, the company had the ability to grow. And I think this is a really important thing to look for in an opportunity in a company, because all the data suggests that we are headed toward an economic winter, that times are going to become challenging, and this is a time to get positioned to take advantage of that. You know, some of the largest companies in the world, a good example is Federal Express, started during an economic winter, and the people that are going to be prepared for the economic winter and the companies that are going to be prepared, they're going to be the ones that actually have a massive growth period during these times. And ours is coming, and we've done really well with that. In addition to that, and this is such a big one, we stand out because of our science. So all these companies in the industry will tell you they have science behind their products, and I guess there's some truth to that, depending on how you define science. Our science is the best science that exists in the world. It's not only the best science, it's done by the best universities and facilities in the world. It is so great that we are in the Medline database. I'm not sure if some of you are familiar with Medline, but Medline is the most prestigious database for nutritional information and research that exists in the world. It's owned by the National Institute of Health. It is very, very difficult to get into. Only about 10% of science makes it in, and then when you get into it, the science is scored based on the power of it. So if you put some kind of scientific research in there and other people use that research, they score that an impact factor. In fact, I have an interview I did on this on my Facebook profile that now has over 80,000 views, an interview with Dr. Gerald Tolzer, who's a world-renowned physician and researcher, who told me that not only is Juice Plus and their research in the Medline database, but we are literally the highest rated nutritional product that exists in the world, bar none. So our science really separates us, and then when you add to that the quality of the products that are attached to it, you know, the complete and the bars and you know, some of the other things, like over here we have the Tower Garden, you realize that we're positioned in a very unique place, and this is going to matter long term as the regulatory environment changes and makes the need for science become a bigger part of what's required to market in this industry. And then, of course, Juice Plus is a timeless product. I cannot imagine, with all the research I've done over the years on the health industry, that we're going to run into a time period when fruits and vegetables become out of, you know, that they're not an important message. What has changed in the 23 years since we began researching about Juice Plus is not the importance of fruits and vegetables, but the growth of that. You know, we now know, back then it was 3 to 5 servings, now it's a lot more servings depending on who you ask, sometimes 9 to 13. We've seen the visibility of this concept of fruits and vegetables grow. We've seen the availability of fruits and vegetables grow, but unfortunately we haven't seen the consumption. So that bridge that we are between what people need to do and what they're doing has never been bigger. And this is really exciting when you have a timeless product and literally less than 1% of the markets you're in are taking your product. We also have a timeless business model, and let me explain what I mean by that. If you look at the kind of tenets of our business model, you know, low risk, that is very attractive in a world when people can't take risk, when they don't have the money to invest in a business, when they don't have the ability to get capital to invest in the business, or if they have it, they don't want to risk it, because you have to understand, in business, there's more people that fail than succeed, and the failure rates tend to be really high. Literally at 10 years, the failure rates are at 96%. There's a lot of reasons for that. We just crossed the point in the U.S. for the first time in history where we're actually having more business fail than we are starting. So the fact that something low risk is a good thing, and the fact that it has low fixed costs. So this is a home business. You know, you don't have to go hire a bunch of people and rent out buildings or buy equipment and furnitures and fixtures. And because of that, this is a business model that allows quick profits. And this is really going to make a difference as the economic winter comes, because time becomes the enemy. You know, we don't really have that ability to wait 5 or 6 years to turn a profit. We need to be able to do it quickly, and we have people literally coming out of the gates being profitable the first month. Time flexibility matters. There's going to be a lot of people that continue to look for a plan A business, you know, so that they can work, a plan B business, so they can work their plan A and then ultimately move in the direction of building a business that can replace that. I will tell you today, this is changing a little bit. We're seeing a lot more people come into our business with a plan A mentality. They come in and they want to build quickly and build toward a full-time business. And of course, that's a personal choice. We know it's how important it is to be global. I've covered that. And then more important to me, and this is the one that sticks out the most, we're customer and mission driven. And this is what separates us from so many companies in the marketplace. If you look at the profile of how our business works, and I'll go over this during the next training we have, customers don't tend to be a big part of the direct selling industry, and if they are, they tend to be distributor buyers. Our business is the exact opposite of that. Over 80% of our sales are end consumers. They're customers that don't really have a business interest but love our product. want to continue to take it. They become repeat customers, and this is the foundation of our business. And I will tell you that not only are we different than the industry, but this is where everything is hidden, where everything is moving. And then this concept of being mission driven, of defining ourselves not just by a product or products, but more important, by locking arms and using our products and our field to change the health of the people that are involved in our culture. You know, inspiring healthy living is our mission, and it's a really important mission. But if you go back to something that Jay talked about in Nashville, and it's something that I've talked about for years, it's a concept. If you really want to understand opportunity, what you have to figure out is what problems you're solving, because the bigger the problems you're involved with, the more you're a solution for them, the stronger your opportunity is, the more it will sort of succeed in any kind of a cycle or any type of a challenge. What was interesting when I went back and looked at, well, what are the big global problems and where do we fit in here? I began to realize that health was just one of the things we do. You know, there's a huge income inequality. I touched on that. 2/3 of the world making $2 a day. Direct selling is changing that. They're providing opportunities to that world that have never existed. We continue to see persistent job growth problems. Direct selling is changing that. It's giving people a home to be able to create income. There's a massive lack of leadership around the world. In my opinion, I've never seen a business model that creates more leadership than direct selling and network marketing. And then, of course, there is this massive growing importance of the health in our economy and how much impact it's having on every country and what they can spend and the quality of health. And this is where we're positioned with our mission. So kind of at the end of the day, I will tell you this. Not only do I believe that the best is yet ahead for us, but I believe we're the future of where this industry is going. You know, when you look at the uniqueness of our business model compared to the others out there, you look at the regulatory environment and some of the things that are changing, you begin to understand we are that model that everybody wants to be. And of course, we're ahead of the curve. And I also think that this speaks to one other important conclusion, and that is that the best stories, you know, our greatest success stories are really ahead of us. You know, I always get to tell Jeff's story because he's been #1 since the first year. Jeff's story is an incredible story, but this is an early journey for this company. And with the kind of success I'm seeing, I believe there will be more Jeff stories, and there will be stories that are bigger than Jeff stories. So it's just kind of a special time. It's a time to take advantage of the timing of what's going on, to understand this industry and the impact it can have from changing people's health and their financial picture. But I always want to remind you, and I want to kind of finish with this: the things you take for granted, someone else is praying for. So often the biggest frustration that I see in this industry with distributors, and certainly I share this, is we attract a lot of people that want a different life. You know, people that have dreams, people that have a big why. And I'm always a little bit frustrated on how many people are willing to go to work, you know, to turn their why into reality and to turn their dreams into reality. And sometimes I think that a lot of people forget how lucky we are, how fortunate we are, the opportunities we have. And I want to encourage you, don't take this for granted. You know, don't be one of those people that misses out on the future that we're going to have. And if you go to work now, I can promise you it's going to end up being a massive reward, probably bigger than you can think. So where do we go from here? Next week, I'm going to talk about how we build to financial freedom. And I kind of built this into a story. You know, Mount Everest, everybody's familiar with that. You know, the goal is to climb to the top, and, you know, kind of breaking down the journey of climbing to financial freedom, talking about, you know, everything from the people that join to the customers, the part-time people, the full-time people. How do I go to an elevated lifestyle? How do I work toward financial independence and ultimately financial freedom? You know, what are the probabilities of me doing that? And if I want to be in that, what kind of choices do I have to make? I want to give you the road to success, and that's going to be our next call. So I thank everybody for tuning in. I hope you have a better understanding of the industry and the impact it has on the world, that you feel stronger about what you're a part of. Don't let the critics and the haters take you away from the facts. You know, you'll find that these kinds of people that challenge our industry likely don't have an understanding of what our industry is. and sometimes we have to be able to educate them. And honestly, that's the biggest driving force behind writing this book. I want to be able to educate more people on the power of direct selling and network marketing. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing all of you sometime soon.
Gordon, Hester, that was absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for that ultimate 45-minute presentation. I don't know why I didn't book you straight away in tomorrow night, because we have to wait another whole week to hear the second part. But I will give everyone a reminder. I mean, I don't think anyone wants to miss out, but please make sure you're back online next Monday night, February the 8th, to hear the second part of Gordon's delivery. I cannot thank you enough again, and I will say I will be the first person to buy that book and ask you for your autograph inside of it, as I'm sure the rest of the people in this company will. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we really can't wait for the second part next week.
Thanks, Carla. Thanks, everybody, and good night.